Game losing streak in team history. Miami hosted the Kings on Monday and found the cure to what ails them and came away with a much-needed victory. What did Eric Spoelstra and the Heat change? Is it the solution moving forward for the rest of the season? And a key player was left out of the rotation. We'll break it all down here on this live episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Tuesday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching this live edition on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. Today's episode is brought to you by NBA Top Shot. NBA Top Shot is the future of being an NBA fan. Own officially licensed rare NFTs of the greatest moments from NBA history. Sign up today at lockedon.nbatopshot.com. Well, let's get this out of the way. A victory. That's all that really matters, right? After four tough losses to the Kings, to the Sixers, the Knicks, the
Warriors,
Nets, Warriors. Yeah, it's been a tough 4-game stretch. They finally get a much-needed victory against the Sacramento Kings, 123-100. Something was absolutely needed to change. Obviously, Miami needed to tweak something, and Eric Spoelstra went to something that we've seen earlier in the season, sitting down Duncan Robinson, putting him on the bench, and starting in his place Max Strus, who happened to be celebrating his 26th birthday today. So let's start there, Wes. What did you think of Max starting in place of Duncan Robinson?
It was interesting that's where Eric Spoelstra decided to make the change, right? With all the drama surrounding Jimmy Butler and everything that was going on. Obviously, you're not going to bench Jimmy Butler, but it felt like Spo needed to do something. He had to just do something, anything. And when you look at the starting lineup, even with PJ Tucker, the way that he's struggled since the All-Star break with his shot and everything going on, defensively, he's also slipped quite a bit, and that hasn't been talked about enough. But the only spot in the starting lineup to really make a change is at that Duncan Robinson spot. And putting Max Strus in that Robinson spot, I don't know that it changes a whole lot of what the Heat do systematically, right? Like, you still had Max Strus coming off of Bam Adebayo dribble handoffs. Yeah, I mean, the broadcast talked about he moves his feet a little bit quicker than Duncan Robinson. Yeah. He takes more charges than Duncan Robinson does, all that stuff. I mean, he is a little bit more of a, gritty kind of player, a little bit more of an attitude type player than Duncan Robinson is.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just what it took. I don't know, but I wouldn't read too much into Strus starting over Duncan Robinson. To me, this was almost change for the sake of change, but knowing that change for the sake of change was needed because whatever was happening in the previous 4 games wasn't good. And so I think it was just part of an overall rotation overhaul, right? Like I know Strus starting might be the headliner there, but no Victor Oladipo.
I do want to get into that a little bit. Because I see Strus and even in watching tonight's game, part of me is confused whether or not the Heat victory is mostly because, well, it's the Kings and they're going to suck, and Sacramento missing Domantas Sabonis, they're missing De'Aaron Fox, who's been notably given Miami trouble over the last couple of years of his career. But at least one thing stood out to me in the Strus starting assignment is that, to your point, and kind of building off of that, I think that the offense wasn't as geared towards getting Duncan the open shot. It didn't worry about getting Max the open shot because he's more capable of finding those opportunities or just catching the ball and letting it fly. He doesn't have to come off multiple screens. You don't stall the offense because you're looking to get Duncan that wide open look. And he's more willing, I think, to cut to the basket. Yeah. Conversely, Duncan gets better looks coming off the bench too, because now all of a sudden you're pairing him alongside Tyler Hero, who is going to be able to drive to the hoop and create his own shot. But if he sprays it out to the perimeter, there Duncan is able to, again, get those wide open looks because you've got a designated scorer, the best scorer on the team, coming off the bench alongside Duncan. So I honestly think it might stick around to be.
Oh, I'm with you. No, I'm totally with you. I think we could see this sticking for sure. And Duncan Robinson frees him up a little bit too. Takes a little bit less pressure off of him and takes him out of his starting lineup where the vibes haven't really been good. And I feel like Duncan Robinson's one of those guys who thrives in good vibes, doesn't really swim when the vibes aren't very good. He was 5 of 8 from 3-point range off the bench. And like you said, like those looks were really clean for him, not just playing next to Tyler Hero. And that partnership has been pretty good all
Yeah.
season long in the minutes that they have gotten together. But
Yeah.
also with the new rotation, Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry were staggered the entire
Yeah.
game. And so there were a lot of times where every time Tyler Hero was on the floor, he wasn't coming in for Kyle Lowry anymore. He was partnered with one of Jimmy Butler or Kyle Lowry for most of the game. And so it frees up Tyler Hero a little bit more too, to just be more of an organic playmaker, right? He still had 2 assists in his first 3 minutes, but that was just coming within the flow of the offense. It wasn't coming out of like forced high screen and roll actions, right? It was just organic within the flow of the offense. Tyler Hero benefited from that. And obviously Duncan Robinson everybody benefited from that tonight with the way that they
Absolutely.
put up points.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Like 123, I feel like they haven't scored that many points,
Oh, wow.
it does feel like that. What were some of the other rotation changes that stood out to you? I know we're going to talk a little bit about Victor Oladipo because I think that's the one
Yeah.
that has really even in our comments, people are already saying, I'm glad the experiment is over. It's something that we are going to talk about a little bit later on in the show. But Gabe Vincent also returned to the lineup after missing several games due to injury. He looked fluid. He was able to contribute a little bit of a boost there. Defensively, he does what he does. Look, he only finished with 5 points, but it was a good 5 points. It felt like whenever he was out on the floor, it was a positive impact. And in fact, he did wind up with a +2 ± for the night. So the return of Gabe Vincent, he's still part of the rotation, even as other players fell out of it. What did you think of Vincent's minutes?
They were solid. Look, I mean, you have a 4-man bench unit of now Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent, and Dwayne Dedman, and that's the group, right? I mean, you're just swapping Strus for Robinson, obviously, like we talked about, but that's the group that has had the most success, sort of coming off the bench all season long. Caleb Martin out with his injury tonight. He's probably going to be a factor in there. I don't know whose minutes he takes. Probably Gabe Vincent's at this point. I mean, who knows? Duncan Robinson's not in the starting lineup. I don't really know where those minutes come from right now. But look, this improved the spacing overall, whether or not it's Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, whatever it is. Like that 4-man unit, if we're going with that unit that's carried the bench for most of the season, the spacing was just so much better. You have multiple 3-point shooters on the floor at all times. You don't have any Victor Oladipo or Markieff Morris minutes, right? And so you just look at what the Heat have done with Oladipo, for example. Like they average 5 fewer 3-point attempts per 100 possessions when Oladipo is on the floor, and they shoot 4% worse from 3-point range when Oladipo is on the floor versus when you've got those other guys that we're talking about and who played tonight. So I thought I love the new rotation patterns. I thought it was just Eric Spoelstra backed into a corner saying, we got to get a win here. Losing the last 4 was unacceptable, but losing against a skeleton crew Sacramento Kings team that was without De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, their 2 best players, would be season over, right? Like if just hang it up, like not even a point of going on. But they needed to get the win tonight, and backed into a corner. We saw the guys that Eric Spoelstra trusted the most, and it wasn't Oladipo or Markieff Morris, who, understandably are still working their way back into game shape and into a rhythm here. He went with the guys who have kind of brought the Heat here too. So a couple other just rotation notes that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So you obviously kind of revamp everything. It wasn't just Strus getting in with Duncan Robinson. I mentioned staggering Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry. In order to get there, you completely change Jimmy Butler's minutes. Jimmy Butler is now on the LeBron James minutes pattern, right? And you see LeBron for years has played the first 6 minutes, comes out, and then plays the last 2 minutes of the first quarter to just give him a little 4-minute breather in the middle of that opening period, and allows him to sort of come out and also observe a little bit of what's going on the court before he checks back in. That's been LeBron's minutes pattern basically since he got with the Lakers, and even a little bit before that. Jimmy Butler just adopts that LeBron James minute pattern. I thought that was really an interesting way, not only to keep Jimmy Butler fresh, but also to do like what LeBron does, right? You come off the court and just see what the game needs, and then you could jump in and provide that too, almost like a 6-man type, right? And it keeps your best player on the floor at the end of quarters, which we know is so important. And then Dwayne Dedman getting in those minutes for Markieff Morris off the bench for Bam Adebayo. I think Dedman finished with about 14 minutes played, which is exactly where you kind of want him. Love the energy. Also a floor spacing factor there. Just solid, absolutely solid beneath the rim in a way that Markieff Morris isn't, because Dwayne Dedman is huge and Markieff Morris is big but not huge. And I thought he played the right guys, and I thought the minutes were really interesting.
Yeah, so shout out to Eric Spoelstra, who I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later on. Jimmy Butler, we should make clear, was sensational tonight. Like,
Yes.
to your point, whether or not he was just more energized, whether or not he was just able to read the game a little bit more effectively because that space in the middle of his rotation change. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but he certainly looked much more comfortable and aggressive. 27 points. The 3-point shot was falling, 3 of 5 from 3-point range. Hit his first 3 attempts. One of which looked particularly bad, but 2 were pretty good, clean looks. His shooting stroke was nice, and then all of a sudden he missed his last 2. But that's still a nice added boost offensively for him. Still chipped in 5 rebounds and 7 assists. So a little bit of the playmaker, a lot of the score version of Jimmy Butler, and he managed to carry the team. Watching this, and it's like I feel like I'm being pessimistic or playing the devil's advocate here, but I know the changes worked. The changes looked good. The team looked better. And yet, how much of that was because they're playing, as you said, a skeleton crew Sacramento team? And I can't separate myself from that.
Playing against the Kings team without its best players, like, you can't take a ton from that, right? I don't know that it matters.
Yeah, not right now.
Because, like, wins are so needed just to, like, you're not going to fix the emotional damage that has been, a result of that 4-game losing streak. I mean, I maintain that sideline kerfuffle was a big deal, and it was, to me, a function of what had been going of greater frustrations. Not just the fact that you gave up a 19-0 run to a Warriors team without its best players. There was something more brewing there, and it boiled over in that moment. You needed a win to smooth things over. I don't care who it could have been against. This team, it could have been against, like, the 87 Celtics. I don't care. It just needed to be against somebody. You just got to keep the momentum going with games upcoming against the Celtics, the Bulls, the Raptors. Obviously going to be tough. A couple of notes before we move on. The points off turnovers thing, I wrote about it this morning. It was still an issue tonight. It's been an issue over this 4-game stretch, like this past week. 24 points off turnovers for the Kings tonight. That's not good. And I know that the Heat scored a bunch of points, but it wasn't like the Kings defense was giving up much resistance. 19 of 40 from 3-point range. A lot of those shots really open. The Kings just going under on Strus and Duncan Robinson like the entire game. Under on Kyle Lowry the entire. For some reason, I know Jimmy Butler hit a season high 3 threes tonight, but the other 19 of 40 is still a lot. And then 54 points in the paint for Miami too. So no resistance at the beyond the arc or in the paint either. So it wasn't exactly hard for the Heat, but like I said, that stuff. Like, you beggars can't be choosers. You needed a win. They got one tonight.
We'll put a pin in the negativity because I'm sure, like, taking away from this, if there's a big overall theme to all this, is that I don't think their problems have been resolved, but they needed this to at least get some kind of chemistry, some kind of comfort level moving forward. Because, as you pointed out, they do have some challenging matchups on the road over the next week. So we'll move on and we'll talk a little bit about who deserves credit for tonight's game. And of course, we'll look a little bit deeper into the rotation and answer all of your questions. So make sure you keep sending those into the comments. But first, NBA Top Shot is the officially licensed NFT of the NBA. Connect with a community of hundreds of thousands of NBA fans as a natural progression of fantasy sports and a way to upgrade your experience as an NBA fan. This is the future of what being a fan looks like. It combines the thrill of trading cards, fantasy sports, and the stock market all in one. Investors include everyone from Michael Jordan to Harrison Barnes, who the Heat played tonight. Players know this is a hot opportunity to get involved in, so why don't you? I've heard people ask, why should I buy a highlight when I could just watch them for free on YouTube? This isn't about just watching the highlight. This is about owning a special piece of NBA history. You're a fan. This is just an extension of that. You own trading cards. It's the same thing. If you own a little piece of paper, I mean, do you really own that particular moment or player? No, of course not. But this is something special. This is something different. This is an evolution, and you want to be on the ground floor. So sign up for NBA Top Shot today. And the best way of doing that is by getting yourself a starter pack. You can pull an NFT of a superstar like LeBron or KD or Jimmy Butler or anybody else. Or you can go to snag a special moments from the marketplace that appeal to you. So head over to lockedon.nbatopshot.com to sign up and take your fandom to the next level by starting your Top Shot collection today. Oh, do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill and take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is a new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save about $720 a year with Truebill. Companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. You forget about them. You just overlook them. Next thing you know, you're getting $5 to $12 every month pulled out of your account. You don't even realize it. Truebill makes it incredibly simple. You just link your accounts to Truebill and cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. Truebill has over 2 million users, and it's helped save them over $100 million. You could be next. Don't fall for subscription scam. Start canceling today at truebill.com/lockedNBA. Go right now to truebill.com/lockedonnba. It could save you thousands a year.
Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available on all platforms. It's time to get into the kitchen, David, and whip up some credit cookies.
I don't know why Baby Rage is trying to antagonize me. Thin Mints, absolutely not. We're going to go with a suggestion from one of our listeners, Steve Kolakidis, longtime listener, I believe. I'm fairly certain he's living in Australia. And he recommended the world famous Australian biscuit or cookie here in the United States, as you people call it. That would be the Tim Tam. The Tim Tam.
We're going with Tim Tams. Yeah, I like it.
I've never tried them before. They sound freaking amazing. I mean, look at this. I mean, it's a biscuit covered in chocolate
with wafers in the middle, right?
Malted biscuits separated by a light hot chocolate cream filling. I mean, that sounds pretty good. They got a caramel flavor, a white chocolate flavor, a double coated one, which according to some people on Twitter is just like too excessive. Kind of like the double stuffed Oreos, I guess that's the equivalent there. But Tim Tams sound pretty awesome.
Double stuffed Oreos are not too excessive. Double stuffed Oreos are the definition of perfectly excessive. Oh. Single stuffed Oreo is not excessive enough, I would say. What are you even doing eating an Oreo if it's not double stuffed? Get double stuffed. They should just get rid of single stuffed and just call the double stuffed just regular Oreos.
That's ridiculous.
All right. So we've got...
This is how America became the most heavy country in the world.
Credit Tim Tams coming up. I'm giving Eric Spoelstra 5 of these Tom Tims.
Tim Tams.
Tom Toms. Eric Spoelstra's getting 5 Tom Toms. He gets 50% of the credit cookies that we have because I don't know. Am I reading too much into the lineup changes? Yes. I thought it provided them the genesis for some sort of energy boost. I think Eric Spoelstra, the lineup changes were very strategic, right? It kept multiple shooters on the floor at all times. Jimmy Butler was playing the 4 in his second stint in each half, which I thought also spread out the floor a lot. It freed up Tyler Hero to be, like I said, more of an organic sort of playmaker and getting his own shot and creating for others, not forcing him to be the point guard on that second unit. The fact that they played Gabe Vincent and Duncan Robinson a lot of minutes off the bench, I thought was huge. I thought that Spoelstra won this game with the lineup changes. I can't imagine what this I'm not saying that they would have lost to the Kings had they not made any lineup changes, but I just can't imagine having done the same thing, right? Isn't that the definition of insanity? He didn't do that. They went back into the lab with 9 games left and made some drastic changes to the rotation, and it worked again against a bad Kings team, but it worked.
Yeah, and I think the second part of that statement, however, has to keep resonating. It's the fact that it's against a bad Kings team. So the changes provided the spark. Things were free flowing, but this is also a Kings team that does not defend at a high level, or is missing their 2 best scorers, et cetera, et cetera. It also helps that you've got Tyler Hero in this game. Tyler Hero missed the first 2 games of that 4-game losing streak. There's a good chance it's not a 4-game losing streak if you've got Tyler Hero scoring 20 points on 8 of 15 shooting the way you did tonight. And I don't think any of that has to do with playing alongside Duncan Robinson or Max Strus or Victor Oladipo or anybody else. He's going to get those shots pretty much regardless. And I know he struggled over the weekend's games, but I still think that having him on the floor early on kind of helps stop the bleeding, or at least prevent the bleeding right away. And if we're looking at a 2-game losing streak to the Knicks and Nets on a back-to-back, not as egregious. It doesn't stand out, but it's the fact that you lost to the Sixers without Embiid and Harden, the fact that you lost to the Warriors without their big 3 and Andre Iguodala. those things resonate. There's the tension there, as you talked about, probably underlying beneath the surface here that we haven't seen manifest at any point during the season. But, listening to players talk, it's something that they've dealt with very regularly. Even Goran Dragic saying, oh, that happens all the time in practices. You never see it, but it happens all the time in practices. This is just one time when it happened to happen during the game. So I don't know if
You
it
and I
was.
very strongly disagree about this.
What about what?
About the fact that it was the sideline brawl wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal. I mean, just the fact that
it's great show. It's great. It's drama, right? I mean,
I don't know.
I just pissed off.
Jimmy Butler. There's been now.
I'm Cuban, bro. We yell all the time.
Jimmy Butler.
We yell all the time. It's just you yell, you get into a big fight, you flip a table, and then you go.
Like I said, you can't yell fire in a movie theater. You can yell at home. What you do in public, it means something different. You have more restraint in public, and they were in public. So
I don't know.
Anyway, we've got 5 Jim Jams left. I'm going to give 3 of them to Jimmy Butler, who did not blow up on the sideline tonight. Rather, he had a really strong performance. I thought his energy was great throughout the game. His efficiency was back to what we expected to be. 27 points on 10 for 14 shooting. Did not expect 3 made 3-pointers in the game. That was just bonus stuff, but he was moving better. He was attacking mismatches, which was the reason that blow up initially. Like that was sort of what prompted the blow up on the sideline was the fact that he was getting called out for not attacking those mismatches against the Warriors. So he did it. I don't know if it was because somebody told him to or because he just realized, hey, this is the best version of me. Whatever the reason is, he went out and did it. Jimmy Butler, 3 Jim Jams.
Yeah, absolutely. Looked great. We talked about it in the first segment. Look, there were still a couple of shaky moments there, like some things where he could have finished around the rim a little bit better, and I don't think that really solves it. But the turnaround jumper was there. He had the baseline jumper going. To your point, he was able to take advantage of mismatches there. He was aggressive. And if the 3-point shot is, a bonus that's going to fall on occasion, that's great. How many Tim Tams do we have left?
We have 2 Tim Tams left.
At least one should go to Bam Adebayo.
One is going to Bam Adebayo, and the other is going to Tyler Hero. Just really strong games from both of them. Bam, 22 points on 10 for 16 shooting, 15 rebounds and assists, a couple steals, a block. Was just the Heat outscored the Kings by 24 points when he was on the court. He dominated. He was absolutely dominant. As good as Jimmy Butler was, and he was awesome, you can make the argument that Bam was the better player. I'm just giving Jimmy Butler more Tim Tams because, we just needed to see that from Jimmy, and I want to give him a lot of cookies as a sign of positive encouragement, right? Yep. That's what you do. So Bam Adebayo didn't need as much positive encouragement, so he doesn't need as many Tim Tams, but you do like to see him return to that aggressive form that we saw before, because a silent thing during this last week with all the drama that was surrounding that sideline stuff, Bam Adebayo was just not as aggressive as we've been accustomed to seeing him before March, right? And so Bam getting back to what he was doing was a really good sign. And then Tyler Hero, 20 points on 8 for 15 shooting, 4 of 8 from 3-point range, including this bananas corner 3 off of one leg that had no business going in, got a shooter's roll on it, but hey, that's karma sometimes. 6 assists, 5 rebounds to go along with it. Great game from Tyler off the bench as well.
Yeah, Tyler was great. I think Bam's game has just continued to flourish. I know he's had a couple rough spots here and there, but tonight's game, looking confident, one time he kind of just sized up his. I'm not sure if they were former teammates. I think Trey Lyles graduated Kentucky before Bam did, but I guess they know each other through the Kentucky pipeline. And he kind of sized him up, took a jumper, and as he was trotting backwards down court, kind of flashed him a look like, I got that in my bag now. And it's just great to see that evolution from Bam. I think we're going to see much more. Look, there's a point that's been discussed on NBA Twitter, Heat Twitter in particular, and I don't know that we've given it any consideration here, but do you think Bam needs to take the reins of this team in order to unlock a better version of this current group? Because I think the jumper, when it opens up the offense, when you have to at least defend it, doesn't clog the paint as much, allows Jimmy to go to work, and allows Kyle to drive and kick the ball out if necessary. Does Bam need to take over the offense to a certain degree in order for this version of this team to be the best it can be?
No, I think Jimmy Butler taking the reins of the team and doing what it is that he has to do is the best version of this team. I think what Bam Adebayo does so well is it reminds me of what Chris Bosh did. I don't know that sort of player. I don't know that the best version of a basketball team is that sort of player taking the reins, right? I mean, I guess we're seeing it with Nikola Jokic in Denver, but to compare Bam to Jokic is just not fair. Somebody who could win 2 straight MVPs. We don't know that Bam's ceiling is that. But Jimmy, we've seen what this version of a team with Jimmy Butler taking the reins at his best looks like in the finals a couple of years ago, or in that finals run a couple of years ago in the bubble. And this team, this supporting cast around Jimmy Butler is better than that one. And so I think if Jimmy is aggressive, and you saw multiple times, not just the I know we talked about the points and the efficiency, attacking mismatches and all that stuff, but when he's getting to the basket like that and the defense is scrambling and he's getting to the free throw line, I mean, I think that Jimmy Butler is still the best player on this team. And the best version of this team is when Jimmy Butler is playing like that, like the way we saw him tonight. And that allows Bam to play a little bit more of a complementary role and still be aggressive in his minutes, right? And I think that's the best version of this team.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I'm not ready right there, although I would like more of a balance. I don't think part of the problem that we've seen over the last 4 games, and certainly in late game situations, even throughout the whole season, is probably a little bit too much Jimmy having the ball in his hands and not being able to create the right kind of offense for himself and others. And that being the case, you need a little bit more from Bam of this kind of game where he's aggressive, he's quick, decisive. He makes the decision.
Well, that's where Kyle Lowry steps in, right? That's sort of the reason you added Kyle Lowry is that you put the ball in his hands, and that frees up Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo to attack those. Because you're right, like both of what they are good at is sort of the same thing: finding smaller dudes and then attacking them off the dribble,
Right.
and specifically in that paint area. And hopefully, with Kyle Lowry doing this, and by the way, his shot has really come along. What's he averaging over the last few games? 5 games, 6 games, like 18, 19 points a game. And so that's loosening up the entire offense. I mean, there's a version of this that works really well. Again, we've seen it for 98% of the regular season. We just haven't really seen it over the last week. We saw it again tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Kyle because even though he doesn't get a Tim Tam, he looks really fluid. Like his shot also is effortless at this point. Like he is not stopping, he's not pausing, he's not he's not worrying about whether or not he's covered or defended well or anything like that. He's shooting it over guys, he's knocking it down, and he's hitting it at a very high
all
clip.
9 points on threes for him tonight. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll move on and we'll talk about the elephant in the room. It's an elephant out of Indiana. That's Victor Oladipo. We've got to talk about the fact that he didn't play, with Markieff Morris not playing tonight either. It's something to consider about whether or not their time here in Miami might be done. Maybe they're not in the playoff rotation moving forward, and we'll break it all down here on Locked On Heat. So make sure you get those questions in, and we'll answer them in the next segment. But first, a reminder that this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Look, I've talked about it before. It's hard to find the parts you're looking for, especially now with supply, demand, things. There's always going to be issues in transportation. They might not have the part. It might not be available for a long time. I get it. You don't want to go to your typical chain store and ask for a part and, they might not have it. Don't go through any of that. Look, rockauto.com is a family-owned business that's been serving auto parts customers online for over 2 decades. They've got the parts you're looking for your car or truck, and it's easy to find what you're looking for. You save time, you save money on their easy-to-navigate website. Just a few easy clicks, and you find everything that you're looking for to replace the parts that you might need on your car or truck. Whether you're a do-it-yourselfer or a mechanic or anywhere in between, you'll find what you're looking for, but only if you go to rockauto.com. Go there and then go to the section that says, how'd you hear about us? And write the phrase locked on so they know we sent you. It's amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. That's rockauto.com. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com, via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Also on Twitter, you can always make sure to get us that way. And be sure to please subscribe to the show if you haven't done so, and leave a review wherever possible. We appreciate all the kind of feedback that we get. The email's been a little dry lately. A couple regulars that still chip in every once in a while and send in some comments, but we love to hear from you. We love to get that kind of feedback, positive and even some negative. Although, what could you possibly have to say negative about this show?
David, we got some news while we were recording. The Raptors did beat the Celtics 115-112. So you want to talk about positive things. The Heat back into first place in the Eastern Conference with a matchup against the Celtics coming up Wednesday night that we will look ahead to. 2250 Kobe. We're going to get to some chat questions here. Says, we tanked the first seed, no other way to see it. David, this theory.
It's a
There's
good one.
other ways to tank the first seed. Causing a firestorm within the organization and in the national media landscape, probably not the way to do it. So I'm not sure I don't think this is a tank job.
How else do you explain them shitting the bed so consistently in fourth quarters? Like all of a sudden not remembering how to do things, the rotation all out of whack. I think this is
injuries, Jimmy Butler rubbing his teammates the wrong way.
It's all planned, baby. It's all part of the plan. You just don't see the big picture. Nostradamus, I'm really surprised at your lack of vision here. This is Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley sitting around in a cigar smoke filled, office in FTX Arena and coming up with a plan and saying, you know what, we might not have the talent, but we have all the opportunity to go to the NBA Finals. What do we do differently? And they're trying to stack the deck in their favor. This is exactly what it is. Have a big blow up. I mean, for Spo to lose his calm,
and then a week later, win a game against the Kings, and then just get the 1 seed again.
Now you see it. Big picture, baby. I don't know.
I have no idea.
I don't know.
Gail writes in, do you guys think Vic will be in the playoff rotation? Now, this is really an interesting question. So, Victor Oladipo, let's just recap what we've seen from Victor Oladipo so far, right?
Sure.
The Heat were outscored by 6 in his 110 minutes that he played across 6 games. Okay. I think that the Oladipo, the eye test was hit or miss, right? There were times offensively where he looked like he was able to get guys off the dribble, cut and make his way around screens. The first step was there sometimes it wasn't. We've seen some dunks. We've seen some reverse layups. I think the playmaking has generally been there, but it's been hampered by the fact that he can't always get the level of penetration that he wants to get. But I think he's seeing stuff the right way. And defensively, there's also been glimpses, but we also haven't really seen him guard the level of player that we saw him guarding when he was an all-defensive team guy and an all-star either, right? Which, again, wasn't supposed to. He's just coming back from 2 years of basically not playing at full strength. So I don't know that Oladipo failed in his time with Miami since coming back. I just think that time ran out on him.
Yeah.
Do you think we see him again as part of the core rotation?
I don't know. I don't see it, to be honest with you. I feel like they kind of have to. Because, but yes and no, because I mean, from a humane perspective, this guy was rehabbing. He's stuck with the team. He wanted an opportunity to show that he could prove it, that he still has it. And, you wrote about that in your piece for The Ringer and everything else about the kind of mental and emotional turmoil he's been through over the last year and plus years. And to be in a situation now where it's like, well, you're still not good enough to contribute. That's a very, very bitter pill for any NBA player to swallow. And I just don't know if Eric Spoelstra can say, you know what, at the risk of, hurting you even more, you're just not able to contribute at the level that we want to, because, we need you to, because we have a bigger picture here that we're trying to win a championship, and your insertion into the rotation changes things. Like, so much of the year, from the Heat fan perspective, and even from our perspective as a media covering this team, is the anticipation of what Oladipo brings. Whenever the offense stagnated in the first half of the season, it's, well, Depot's going to be there. He's eventually going to provide it. When the defense struggled, well, guess what? Victor Oladipo provides that too. And then the trade deadline passes, nothing changes. Well, you know what? They're still getting an acquisition in Victor Oladipo. And then you get Victor Oladipo, and it's kind of been flat. It has not been it hasn't lived up to the expectations, the anticipation perhaps. And now that you're here, I just don't know what else to say about Oladipo and whether or not he can contribute, because he just hasn't shown it. And inserting him into the rotation has thrown everybody else off kilter to boot. So it's not just about him underperforming, it's about everybody else struggling as well as a result. And that's not fair. It's not that you can blame Oladipo necessarily, but that's just the way it's worked out, because you're doing this in late March as opposed to early November.
Well, I like what you hit on there about the fact that they didn't add anybody at the deadline or at the buyout market because they knew Oladipo was coming back, and they kind of had to reserve some minutes, right, for Oladipo to play. And if you bring somebody in on the buyout market at the deadline who's an actual rotation type of player, then where do those Oladipo minutes come from? And you kind of knew this entire time, like, the Oladipo thing was going to be a little weird at first. It was going to be a little wonky. It was going to be a little slow, because that's just what happens when you don't play for 2 years. And I think they were just reserving that spot all along. And it also sort of speaks to the level of depth that this team has too, because they didn't really need it. Like, if they thought that they really needed that additional player in addition to Caleb Martin, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Tyler Hero, Dwayne Dedmon off the bench, then I think they probably would have, and not just been hopeful, sort of crossing your fingers that Oladipo was that dude for you. There's always been an acknowledgement from this team that Oladipo was sort of just bonus, that they probably didn't need. I think Oladipo could have been the ultimate X factor for the Heat, but only if he were healthy. And it's very clear right now they just didn't have enough time. And it was interesting. One of the players, or was it Spoelstra, somebody said a couple days ago, we thought that this process would get started a couple months ago, not a couple of weeks ago.
Kyle
And
Lowry
had it
said,
been a couple of months ago, I think we would have seen a very different version of the rotation at this point in the season. But you're right. It's not fair, but life ain't fair. Victor Oladipo knows that. He was supposed to get a big contract in free agency and be a perennial all-star. Didn't happen for him. Yeah, right? The ligament wasn't attached the right way, and he's missed 2 years of his career. So it hasn't been fair for him, but it sucks. But the Heat can't worry about what's fair. They have to worry about winning a title this year. And right now, you got to keep the good times rolling. You got to keep the momentum moving in the right direction. And I don't know that you can afford to work Oladipo in right now. I thought tonight was really indicative of what I think the rotation is going to be going forward. We could see some changes. I don't think that one game against the Sacramento Kings constitutes put a stamp of approval on this new rotation. It's working, but I do think that Victor Oladipo is going to be on the outside looking in when push comes to shove. Because like I said, they were in the corner. Erik Spoelstra had to go with the dudes he trusted the most, because a win against a loss to Sacramento tonight would have been the end of the year, I think. And they couldn't afford it. And so he went with the guys he trusts the most, and that wasn't Victor Oladipo. Let's go to this next question.
Before we do that, you're talking about Victor Oladipo, and we haven't really discussed Markieff Morris, and that's mostly because we got a very good game from Dwayne Dedmon, who has not looked particularly sharp.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference, is that today we saw the good version of Dedmon, where he's grabbing rebounds, where he's aggressive, making the right pass. Not exactly scoring a ton or anything like that, but still making a positive contribution overall. He didn't even have the 3-point shot falling. But, we've seen Morris be really good, I think, like surprisingly good. And yet, what's his role?
He just doesn't give. Undersized. He's right. He's too undersized. He's not giving you what you need offensively. He's not. I mean, Dwayne Dedmon is he a worse floor spacer than Markieff Morris? I don't think so. And so I think there's some dynamic things that Markieff Morris gives you. I just don't know that it's better than what Dwayne Dedmon gives you overall. He gives you a physical presence in the paint. I think that's a good change of pace, as opposed to doubling down on sort of that finesse type of defense that you have when Bam Adebayo is in the game. I think you do want to change the pace a little bit defensively. And Markieff Morris, I know that we're looking at Markieff Morris being out of the rotation tonight. He was out of the rotation over the weekend against Brooklyn. I know Erik Spoelstra didn't coach in that game. Chris Quinn did not make that move to put Dedmon in over Markieff Morris on his own. That was an Erik Spoelstra decision that Chris Quinn carried out in Spoelstra's absence. So I think that they've seen enough from Markieff Morris. It's just, Morris is one of those guys that he can't help it. Both of the Morris twins, they're high usage. Dwayne Dedmon, that's the thing. He's not high usage. And I think you're better off, trading those looks from those players and getting more looks from 3-point range from the Gabe Vincents, the Duncan Robinson, Max Struses that you have in your bench. Akira 11 in Roman numerals writes in, we must keep Vic for next season. This is sort of an interesting thing. I know that we're going to touch on, in multiple episodes later on, but just briefly here, the one silver lining to not playing Victor Oladipo for the rest of the season keeps that market value down this summer. I don't know. Just interesting.
That's cold. No, you're right. It's unfortunately right, but yes, that is the nature.
I don't think it's the reason why. I just think it's sort of
no. They're not benching him because they're like, haha, no one's going to offer him a big contract. Even the Heat, as Machiavellian as they've been on times past, are not that capable, I think.
Josh writes in, does Tyler Hero have to average at least 20 for us to make a deep run? Feels like we can't lose any scores at all right now. Short answer is yes.
Yeah.
A deep run? Yeah. I mean, but Tyler Hero's averaged 20 for them all season. So I'm not stressed about it.
I mean, the question is the inverse. Can they win if he scores under 10? And the answer has been no.
No. Like I said, I'm not stressed about it.
Well, because we've seen those moments though. Like he's prone to having the occasional bad game. It doesn't happen a lot, and it might not happen in the playoffs if they can continue to go on a stress run, on a deep run. But I mean, you can find ways against better teams like, Milwaukee and others that could key in on what Tyler does well and shut him down. And then it kind of, it's up to somebody else to step up in that second unit. And is it Duncan now that he seems like he's probably coming off the bench? I'm not sure. Is it Gabe Vincent? Like, Gabe's offense has not been clicking in quite some time. Somebody else needs to step up and provide a boost there to to at least carry on while you're sitting down Jimmy or Bam or Kyle.
Maybe that's another reason why you have Kyle Lowry or Jimmy Butler staggered and making sure one of them is playing with Tyler Hero too, right? Is because it frees up Tyler Hero. Just, hey, we need you to score. There's probably an understanding from the Heat's organization. We need Tyler Hero to score 20. We don't necessarily need him to get 6 assists a game. We need him to score 20 points per game. And look, I'm a believer in Tyler Hero. I think he ups his game in the playoffs. Last year's first round series was an anomaly, I think, because everybody on the Heat sucked for that whole series, including Tyler. But like I said, he's averaged 20 points a game all season. He steps up against really good teams all season long. I think he'll do it again in the playoffs. I believe in his bag. I believe in the work that he did. I think he's a legit scorer. There's no reason why he can't be. I don't know. I don't want to take 22 literal, but 20 period
right
too literal, but just around there, right? He needs to just be a good scorer, an effective scorer, and a consistent scorer the way he's been all season long. But you could say that about any team that's relied on having scores. I mean, Tyler Hero's been one of Miami's best scorers all season. You take another team's best scorers out of the equation, and they're probably not going to have a deep playoff run either. It's just the way this stuff works.
He just happens to come off the bench too. I don't know that anybody else. I don't know that anybody else in a previous 6 Man of the Year candidate, like a Lou Williams or something like that, were the Clippers counting on Lou Williams notching 20, 23 points off the bench in order for them to win?
No, I don't. I think the closest thing would be Andre Iguodala, but not from a scoring perspective, but just the level of importance to the team.
Yeah,
they needed Iguodala in the 6-man role. Tyler Hero
was part of their best. He was part of their best lineup too, right? I mean, with Iguodala on the floor. So, absolutely. Well, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the next episode. We'll have Rowan Nadkarni of Sports Illustrated to join us, and make sure you get in whatever questions you want us to ask Rowan over the next couple of hours before we talk to him tomorrow afternoon. So make sure you send those in. And thank you again for tuning in to today's live episode. We love hearing from you. We love your feedback, and we love interacting with you in every way, shape, or form. So make sure you subscribe, leave comments, send us emails, however you can. We love getting that feedback. And thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you make your second listen Locked On NBA, Locked On Experts, covering the biggest stories around the NBA every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. I'll be talking about all the teams around the NBA later on tonight. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.